Hello and welcome to another video, or welcome back to my channel. Hi, I hope you're all having a good day. I'm having a fine day myself. You might hear some background noises in this video because the daycare center is open, so it's actually just near next door, and so you might hear children shouting. You might hear sounds of cartoon in the background because that's not coming from the daycare center, but my grandma is watching TV. Anyway, in this video I'm going to complain, and I'm pretty sure you know what I am going to complain about because I'm pretty sure I would already have the right thumbnail for that. But yeah, just to repeat, I'm going to talk about these books which I DNF'd before. This one is especially popular on BookTube, social media. I know it's popular on Instagram as well. Breast and Eggs by Mieko Kawakami, translated from the Japanese into English by Bett and David Boyd. I know I should have complained about these books earlier, as in, you know, make a video about these books earlier, because I actually DNF'd them last month. But, you know, complain and complaining, they are timeless, so you can complain anytime. I've never thought about that, and now my mind is literally blown. Anyway, yeah, the second book is They by K. Dick. I'm going to talk about this book later on, so I'm going to start with this one first. Actually, this book was a book that I got new. I bought it on the 18th of December 2021, and you might wonder, why is that important? Well, it might not be really important, even if I were to explain why, but I actually scribbled something here. It's kind of like a pre-Christmas gift for myself, you know. I even put a Merry Christmas to yourself greeting right here. That, you know, it goes without saying that I lived alone at that time. Anyway, it was a Christmas gift for myself, partly because I was sort of influenced by FOMO. Although at that time the buzz around this book sort of died down a little bit, you know, so it was kind of silent. It wasn't as hot as it was a year before. Nonetheless, I got myself this because I was kind of interested in it, and I thought it was, you know, it just had this really interesting cover and all, you know, pink and black. Everything about this book just looked interesting, and I sort of knew about what this book was going to be about, you know, themes of womanhood, women's bodies, motherhood, the female existence. You know, all those things are some things that I find really interesting, and I really like reading about those. So I got it, I read it. The first story was okay. The second story was also kind of okay, but overall it just didn't really work for me. So this book is about this. This book is actually divided into two sections, and those two sections, they are sort of about different plot lines, but both of them deal in a way with women's bodies, womanhood, motherhood. You know, it also touches upon things like beauty, you know, choices, women's choices on what they want to do with their bodies, things that relate to growing up as a young woman, you know, puberty, menstruation, and all those things, and realizing the changes that happens to your body as a young woman. So those things are really interesting. Both of those stories, both of the parts deal with those. The first one is it deals with this. You know, we have this main character named Natsuko. Her sister and her niece visit her in Tokyo. And so what happens is that her sister, who's working as a hostess in a different city, she wants to get a breast augmentation operation, and she has been sort of thinking about the price, and she has been consulting with Natsuko if she approves or not, all sorts of those things. At the same time, Natsuko's niece, Midoriko, she sort of has this road relationship with her mom for reasons that will be explored later in this book. But the main thing is that Midoriko is not talking to her mom. She talks to people in her school, for example, but she does not talk with her mom, and so she just communicates by writing on paper. So yeah, we sort of have this kind of like intrigue as to why these characters act this way. The second story takes place a few years after the first one, and now Natsuko, when she's in the first story, she was just a struggling writer. In the second story, she has sort of become a more successful writer. She's able to make a living out of it, and she is still single, and she's considering having artificial insemination and to be a mom, a single mother at an older age. At the same time, she has also kind of been pondering, reflecting on her career as a writer, her insecurities that she feels about her own, say, quality as a writer, those sorts of things. Personally, I like the second story more because it feels a little bit more reflective. It just feels it shows this character as someone who is more neurotic, insecure, and I always love insecure characters. The first story, many people like that one. I know most of the people I talked about this book with, they prefer the first stories, and I sort of can see why. The first story is more, it has more things happening. Basically, it has the action with with the sister wanting to get a boob job, and the niece who does not talk and all that. It has plenty of drama actually, but I personally think that the first story is a bit melodramatic with something that happens at the end of that story regarding the mom and her daughter, what their the lack of communication between them culminates into. I thought that was dramatic. If you have read the story, you would know what I mean. It has something to do with sudden things breaking. It was okay, but it just felt kind of out of place in terms of tone, I think. So the first story was just that. It didn't really work for me. The second story worked for me because of the reasons I mentioned earlier. However, the second story, it had an issue with padding. Okay, so just for a bit of comparison, this is the interesting first story. The so-called interesting first story. The second story is this long, and it's about Natsuko thinking about or reflecting on the options that she has when it comes to artificial insemination, and also thinking about her career as a writer. And imagine if she thinks about those things this long. Now, of course, I DNF this book, and so I only read up until this point. But it already felt like too long for me. I like the voice, but it feels like it's dragged so much. It's really draggy. A lot of padding, a lot of information, especially on artificial insemination, sperm banks. It sort of feels like a non-fiction on, say, current issues on sperm donations in Japan, sort of a thing. And it makes the prose feel kind of stilted to me. So yeah, that didn't really work. I actually got into a slumpy mood reading this book because it just felt very boring, very dry. Despite the voice that I like, it just felt very dry. Another note that I just kind of want to add with this book is that apparently this is a translation of a work that was rewritten from, correct me if I'm not wrong, correct me if I'm wrong. This book was a translation of a work that was rewritten from the original Japanese work that won the Akutagawa Prize. So what I'm reading, or rather what I read, was not actually the one that won the prize, or the translation that won the prize, but a rewritten version containing the same set of characters. The work that won the prize in Japanese was called Breast and Eggs, and the rewritten version, which is actually the first part of this book, and so I think it also includes the second part. The rewritten version had an entirely different name in Japanese, but it was translated into Breast and Eggs. I hope I'm not confusing you guys, but there is something about that just kind of made me feel, I don't know, it's just it makes me feel more intrigued to read the original version. But yeah, to know that this is the rewritten version, I'm not sure how different it is. I can't read Japanese. So maybe some of you guys know about how it is different and those stuff. But yeah, it just kind of made me feel a little bit different to know that that the translation is something else. But anyway, at least the translation is a translation of the work done by the author themselves also. So it's kind of like the work of the original author anyway. So it's just a different work, a rewritten version, but by the author. So, but it just kind of gives me this weird tingling feeling in my head. Anyway, yeah, let me know what you think about this book. I know this book is a favorite with many people, but it wasn't for me. Yeah, it just didn't work for me. Anyway, moving on to the next book. This is by K. Dick. It's called They. And this book was actually given by my friend from Bookstagram, Brian. And he mailed me this book. I was actually quite interested in the premise of this book. It sounded intriguing. So basically it's about this group of nameless people, faceless people, who are terrorizing this English countryside. And what they do essentially is that they would catch, arrest, maim, or even kill those who don't conform to societal standards. People who live alone, people who do things differently, who think things differently, who say things are different. And that especially applies to people like artists, creators, writers. They are especially in danger. But throughout this story, throughout this book, is we don't really get to see who exactly this group of terrorists is, and they are always referred to by the third person plural pronoun they, hence the title. Now this book is actually a collection of interconnected short stories, not necessarily chronologically arranged, but they all just sort of deal with similar things that happen to the people living in that countryside, and how they deal with this sort of ominously evil group of enforcers who would come and catch people and take them somewhere, disappear them, or kill them, or maim them, or something. It sounds interesting, but I feel that the writing of this book is it feels very uninspiring. Events are described as they happen, pacing is really off. Like sometimes you get to linger on certain events for quite a while, and then suddenly it just switch to something else, or just switch to different perspective, and it just kind of disrupts the flow of the story. Sometimes it would feel like it's kind of in a more controlled flow where you get to immerse yourself in a particular incident in the book, and then suddenly it changes into another event that takes place a few hours later or a day later, and it just feels kind of weird. There is no signal markers for those, you know, transition. So yeah, the pacing feels kind of weird. Characters, now it feels intriguing to have this group of antagonists to be this unidentified people, you know, without identity, without distinct identity. So we can't really like place any human quality to these people. They may as well be robots. That's totally fine for me. But the people who are being terrorized, the people in the village, you know, those that get hurt, for example, those that get arrested, or even the protagonists, they're just referred to by their names. They certainly have names, but that is not enough to provide a sense of identity to these characters. And so as a result, when something happens to these characters, or when they do something, you don't feel like you really care about what they do. You feel like they're just there as a stand-in for something. If an artist gets arrested or gets glass put into his eyes in this book, you feel like that artist, who has a name by the way, but I forgot the name, you feel like that artist is just a stand-in for a generic artist who dares to think differently and suffers as a consequence. That's it. As a concept, you know, you see the characters as concept, and so you don't really feel connected to those people, and because of that, I also don't really care so much about, like, I care about what the book wants to say, but it's just that I can't really connect with what it wants to say. I know, I'm aware of the idea that it wants to put forward, but it's just that it's written in such a fatigued and just straight up uninspiring fashion that I just feel tired reading this book. Even though it's a very short book, I usually do not DNF short books because, you know, sometimes I like to have 1 or 2 stars in my Goodreads red shelf, you know. There's a little bit of variety, but I just couldn't finish this book. It was just so tiring to read. Yeah. Anyway, this book has an interesting story, by the way. It was published in 1977, and it was not really popular. And so it was sort of shelved. It wasn't published again. And after that, recently, I'm not sure when, but recently the manuscript was discovered. So I'm pretty sure that was kind of like one of the things that publishers use to market this book, you know, the lost manuscript rediscovered. I mean, that sounds like a good story, but I feel that it sort of makes me feel cheated a bit. I mean, it's probably my fault as well for really like eating up that kind of marketing strategy, but in my defense, I do think that the premise is intriguing. Anyway, let me know if you have read They by K. Dick. Yeah, and let me know if you like it, what you think about it, and also about Breasts and Eggs, what you feel about these 2 books. I would love to know if you have different thoughts. Maybe there are certain things that I miss. but yeah, these are my recent DNFs. I don't think I'm going to have any DNF anytime soon. Hopefully, I always say it's good to DNF, and I do feel kind of free after I DNF things, but it's like breaking up. I mean, I talk about this as if I know how breaking up feels. I mean, I've never broken up before. Anyway, it does feel like that. It feels like you're leaving something that has a particular promise to it. You feel like it has potential to turn into something that blooms. That turns beautiful, but no, it does not. Anyway, I'm gonna stop this video before I get more sappy and philosophizing, and I'll see you again in a different one. So until then, take care. Thanks for watching. Bye.